Hey, what's going on, you guys? My name is the Raptor, and welcome back to Who'd Win and Why. And this time we've got Marvel's Max Dillon, aka Electro, going up against DC's Leslie Willis, aka Livewire. These two electrifying enemies have caused a lot of trouble for a number of amazing heroes respectively, and they both certainly know how to hold a real grudge against them. And today it's time for me to decide who I think would win this shocking showdown. So, who'd win and why? Let's find out! Alright, so first we're going to talk about Electro. Maxwell Dillon started out as a technician who did various work with electrical cables, and it was while on the job when his life would be changed forever. When he was up next to power lines during his work, he was suddenly struck by lightning, and this freak accident transformed the inner workings of his body to be able to generate incredible amounts of electricity and fire them from his hands, as well as a bunch of other electric-based abilities. But in order for Max to gain better control of his power and contain it all, he stole electrical technology from Stark Industries, because we all know Spider-Man villains can't get enough of that stuff nowadays. Max incorporated this equipment into a bright yellow and green supervillain costume, and thus his career as the infamous Electro began. As he was committing crimes across New York City, J. Jonah Jameson, the head of the Daily Bugle, started spreading a false rumor throughout his newspaper that Electro was actually Spider-Man operating under a new identity, and Spider-Man was naturally not too happy about that. He tracked down Electro and planned to put him behind bars to clear his name, though Spidey couldn't even touch him without getting severely shocked by electricity, leading to his escape. And while Spider-Man did eventually take him down by using the right tools, Electro would prove to be one of Spidey's most powerful and persistent opponents. Electro's primary ability is generating electricity from his own body, and as most of you already know, he can generate a lot of it. While unaided, it takes about a full minute for his body to generate 10,000 volts of electricity, which he can use to send powerful electric blasts and bolts towards his enemies. How powerful, you ask? Well, Electro has many impressive feats of power, the best of which was when he blew up an entire prison rift, equaling around 150 tons of TNT. But even that doesn't appear to be his maximum output, considering that he's been able to do some serious damage to Spider-Man, who can survive explosions worth a few thousand tons of TNT. His attacks are not only very dangerous, they're also hard to avoid as they travel at the same speed as real natural lightning bolts, over 220,000 miles per hour, and he's been able to tag incredibly quick characters like Spidey, Human Torch, and even the lightspeed running Quicksilver. In addition to generating these attacks himself, Electro can also absorb electricity from outside sources, such as electric machinery, to charge up even faster, and the more he continually absorbs, the longer it will be before he's depleted, though he's obviously not able to generate or absorb past his maximum storage capacity, that being 10 million volts. When he reaches this level, Electro can become a being purely made out of electricity that can electrocute anyone who so much as touches him, and he can release all of his voltage at once for maximum damage, though this obviously would leave him significantly less powerful afterward. And of course, he possesses an extremely high level of resistance to electricity in every form, but all of that is far from his full extent of his supercharged abilities. Aside from the typical electricity absorbing and releasing, Electro has a lot going for him in regards to his arsenal of powers. He can detect sources of electricity easily and can override or overload various types of electrical devices, either manipulating them mentally or just short-circuiting them. He can't exactly fly in the same way that Wonder Woman or Angel can do naturally, but what he can do is emit electricity and use it to hover, or he can even ride it through the air, maximizing his speed and maneuverability. Similarly, thanks to his electromagnetic abilities, Electro can actually propel himself along electrical lines by creating a strong magnetic field that opposes the line's magnetic field, giving him even more mobility options. And of course, having control over electromagnetism allows him to manipulate the electron attractions of various surfaces, something he's quite used to doing when fighting Spider-Man to mess up his wall crawling. Obviously, Electro works better during long-range combat rather than close range, but thankfully he can use his powers to augment his physical capabilities to certain degrees, allowing him to increase his stamina, lift nearly 500 pounds, and take punishment from Spider-Man's super strength. While Spidey has been known to pull his punches so that they don't become lethal, surviving assaults from him on any level is quite the achievement. And believe it or not, it's not just Spider-Man. Electro has had run-ins with some Fantastic Four members, Avengers, and other Spider-Man villains, and he spent plenty of time as both a solo working villain and as a member of the Sinister Six many times, giving him even more opportunities to show off just how destructive he can be. Electro has had more than his fair share regarding experience and feats in the comics, but he does have some big weaknesses that can't be ignored. Even with his great power, Electro will temporarily lose his electrical abilities if he comes into contact with enough water, obviously leaving him vulnerable. Also, Electro is no more than an idiot despite his accomplishments, and he's lost many fights just due to that fact, regardless of how much power he's accumulated. Yet even with his flaws, Electro has maintained his status as one of the greatest threats Spider-Man has faced over and over again. With his amazing power and versatility at his fingertips, it's gonna take a lot to put him down for good when he's at his max. Alright, so now it's time to move over to Livewire. Leslie Willis started out as a radio host who was just as popular among the listeners of Metropolis as she was controversial. Unlike the views of most of her fellow citizens, Leslie wasn't a big fan of the city's superhero Boy Scout Superman, and she expressed that opinion pretty thoroughly while on the air. For a long time this wasn't a problem. She was allowed to say whatever she wanted, and of course she was very successful, for the time being. However, one day Leslie's boss interrupted her live show and fired her on the spot, and it was revealed that his wife was saved by Superman from being killed by a supervillain, so he reasonably didn't want Leslie talking negatively about the Man of Steel any longer. Outraged by all of this, Leslie decided to get her revenge and take the fight to Superman. Because wouldn't you know it, Leslie was born with the power of electrokinesis, which no one ever knew about, supposedly. After absorbing the voltage of a lightning bolt, Leslie, now known as Livewire, confronted Superman and battled him, eventually leading to Superman's realization that Livewire had enough electrical power to destroy all of Metropolis, and needed to be neutralized and fast. Superman decided that the best option was to throw her in the middle of a thunderstorm which would hopefully overload her, and thankfully it did, though little did Superman know that encounter was far from the end of Leslie's supervillain career. Livewire's electrokinesis gives her everything you'd expect: electricity generation, projection, and absorption. And despite her relative unpopularity to other comic book villains, she's got more than enough feats to prove that she's packing some serious heat in terms of power. She's damaged many different characters who can take far more than just normal electric shocks and lightning strikes, like Superman and Killer Frost, and her electricity has proved a match for the likes of Kryptonian heat vision and Blue Beetle's energy attacks when clashing. Her electric attacks travel as fast as lightning, and she can alter the size of her attacks to massive proportions, creating huge lightning blasts that she can fire from her hands, or just making balls of electricity that are bigger than buildings. Of course, these more amplified attacks require more voltage to pull off, though this isn't usually a problem as she contains several megavolts of electricity standardly according to Star Labs, and her body keeps generating more over time, and she can always absorb more voltage from other sources, both natural and artificial, if she does ever run low. Making physical contact with her in any way can be detrimental, leaving a gigantic burn on your body after just one touch, and enough prolonged contact will eventually be fatal. Her high resistance to all kinds of electricity is also very well established, though she's definitely not immune as shown by her own lightning blast being used against her and knocking her out, and her being overloaded in the past means that she's obviously not able to absorb more and more voltage indefinitely. Thankfully though, Livewire's got even more options that she can choose between during battle to make up for her limitations. One thing she's fairly notorious for is transforming into pure living electricity at will, and this not only immensely increases her durability, but also allows her to travel through power lines at great speeds. And along with draining or manipulating certain technology, Livewire is a master of altering transmission signals, taking over many television signals at once, and creating a comm link that stretched across the entire planet, among other feats. She can generate her own intense electromagnetic field for a wide variety of applications, like many other electrokinetic characters of DC, but arguably her most astonishing power of all is her electron reconstruction. With this, Livewire can alter matter at a subatomic level, changing it to practically whatever she wants, like how she completely transformed a hospital gown into a black leotard and change the S symbol on her containment suit to an L symbol. She doesn't always use this trait the most offensively, but it can be extremely advantageous when used at its best nonetheless. Livewire's fast enough to tag Superman and other lightspeed foes in combat, and by using her abilities to move through the air, her flight can reach remarkable speeds as well. Not to mention she can use her stored power to vastly increase her endurance. And while she has spent a lot of time involved in villainy, including when she teamed up with the infamous Secret Society of Supervillains, she's also flipped over to the good side every now and again, fighting against and alongside superpowered beings on both sides of the spectrum. For a character that was originally created for a kid's cartoon, she's certainly made her impact on the superhero world. While Livewire undoubtedly has a lot of electrical power at her disposal, she's clearly not the best when it comes to taking that kind of punishment as mentioned before when she was knocked out by her own blast, making her somewhat of a glass cannon. Additionally, Livewire's been known to go a little mad with power under certain conditions if she absorbs too much, and getting her considerably wet can severely mess with her electrokinesis. But even when things don't go her way, Livewire always manages to come back into the spotlight more skilled than ever. Thanks to her crazy abilities and somewhat crazy mind, she's the definition of an unpredictable powerhouse, and she's not going to go down without one hell of a fight. Alright, so now that I've gone over both of these characters, it's finally time for me to say who I think would win this battle. And with powers and abilities that are so well matched, both Electro and Livewire could give each other a good run for their money if they were to ever meet and do battle. And it can be extremely tough to find any key differences between the two without much deep digging. However, after looking at everything they can give and everything they can take, I do personally believe that Livewire would be the winner of this fight. And if you think that Electro would win, that's great, that's totally fine, let me know why down in the comments below, but first here's my reasoning for why I think Livewire would win more often than not. The interesting thing about these characters is that not only are they both resistant to high amounts of electricity, they can also continuously absorb ridiculous amounts of it, and that can definitely include electrical attacks if they can react quickly enough to do so. And at face value, this presents a real conundrum, considering that both Electro and Livewire could theoretically absorb each other's attacks indefinitely and just add it to their own power for their next attacks. Theoretically. But as we've seen and discussed, both of these villains have hard limits on how much electricity they're able to store at any given time, leading either to an inability to absorb any further or just being overloaded. So the real question is, how much electricity are they each able to contain, and who is less likely to be overloaded first? And unfortunately for Electro, as powerful as he can get, Livewire's got him completely beat in this area, possessing a storage capacity that outclasses his own. And if you don't believe me, I don't blame you. But let's take a dive into what Max and Leslie are really capable of. There's also a number of things worth mentioning regarding their respective levels of straight power output, but we'll get into that a bit later. As we know, Electro is capable of containing 10 million volts of electricity before he stops producing electricity on his own and reaches his limit. Keep in mind also that this is his maximum amount of power that he can store, not continuously fire. If he lets out all of this power at once, he has to start generating more power basically from scratch, so his normal attacks definitely don't reach this level. Livewire's maximum storage capacity is a little tougher to figure out, but thankfully it's not too complicated to find out what she should be capable of. There have been claims and estimations of Livewire's limits made before, like how Star Labs found that she could emit 50 million volts without even trying, and how Livewire herself said that she could fire up to 100 million volts. Both of those numbers are already many times greater than Electro's storage capacity, but it gets worse. Livewire has been shown easily absorbing natural lightning bolts in the past, and in fact it took her being thrown in the middle of a thunderstorm in order to overtax her limit. So this would be at around the point when she can't absorb any more electricity, but for the sake of argument, let's lowball her and say that she can't absorb more voltage than what's in just one natural lightning bolt. Over 20 times less impressive, by the way. You know how many volts can be found in a lightning bolt? 1 billion. At bare minimum, this means that Livewire can absorb 100 times more voltage than Electro, though because of the massive lowball, it's probably more like a couple thousand times greater. Even just using a tiny fraction of her maximum voltage output would be too much for Electro's whole storage capacity, whereas Electro expelling all of his energy at once doesn't come close to reaching Livewire's. Electro would have no hope of being able to absorb her energy and redirect it, meaning he'd either get hurt by the massive energy despite his resistance to electricity or just get overloaded trying to absorb it. And Livewire can safely absorb anything Electro could dish out, basically making all of his attacks useless. Now, we haven't talked much about actual power output in this section of the video, and there's a good reason for that. Voltage alone isn't what determines energy output, rather the voltage multiplied by the electrical charge. This is why someone like Electro, who can't produce the voltage of a natural lightning bolt, which some humans have survived strikes from before, is still able to harm Spider-Man, who can take a couple kilotons of TNT at least. But considering that Electro's best measurable feat without scaling comes out to far less than this, 160 tons of TNT at most, it's hard to imagine that he can hit with much more than a few kilotons without using all of his power at once. Meanwhile, Livewire's been able to damage characters as tough as Superman and Supergirl with her normal attacks, who can obviously take way more than several kilotons with no problem at all, and she had the potential to destroy a whole city in just her comic origin story, putting her power output in the megatons of TNT. But even if Electro was much more powerful than he is, it wouldn't make a difference because again, Livewire can absorb any of Electro's attacks, and Electro can't negate any of Livewire's in that way. The only hope for Electro at this point would be if his versatility could be of any help, or if he'd be fast enough to consistently catch Livewire off guard. And sadly, Livewire has him beat in both of these areas too. There's not too much Electro can do that Livewire wouldn't be able to do as well in some way, and Livewire has some abilities that could put her further ahead, like her electron reconstruction and how she can become pure energy and deadly to the touch far more often than Electro can. And for speed, while the speed of their attacks may be even, Livewire's reaction speed is still much more impressive, as Electro tagging Spider-Man and Quicksilver doesn't stack up to Livewire tagging Superman over and over again. And Superman even claimed that she's able to move at the speed of lightning, not just her attacks, but also her herself. And considering that Superman can move so fast that time appears to slow down around him, that's a pretty reliable statement coming from him. Oh, and they're both pretty lackluster as far as strategy is concerned, and while Electro definitely has more experience as a whole, it's not going to change the game-ending power and storage gaps in Livewire's favor. Overall, both of these characters are very powerful in their own rights and have pulled off impressive things, but Livewire takes everything Electro could be capable of one step further. Livewire may be considered a glass cannon by some, but that's really only in the context of her own power, and when you have someone like Electro who falls so short in comparison, it really doesn't matter. Electro may have more supervillain experience, but I feel that Livewire's shockingly superior speed, versatility, power, and storage capacity would spell out his defeat. So, in my opinion, the winner is Livewire. So guys, thank you all so much for watching. I really do appreciate it. If you liked this video, please give this video a huge like. I always appreciate the likes. You can leave your comments down in the comments below. Subscribe if you could too, that'd be amazing. If you want to see more Who'd Win and Why, you can click the box on the right. Or if you want to see more what the channel has in store, you can click the box on the left. But no matter what you guys do, thank you all so much for watching. I really do appreciate it. And next time on Who'd Win and Why, we've got the Slender Man going up against Pennywise. See you all then.